Hello again my friends. Unsurprisingly, competitive multiplayer is an essential component of Destiny's gameplay. What may surprise gamers however is just how Bungie is integrating Destiny's multiplayer into the game. Players will be able to dive into a range of competitive multiplayer modes without ever having to leave the single player experience. Bungie is tying every aspect of the game into Destiny's fictional narrative, including its competitive multiplayer, which means there's a story behind why Destiny's Guardians create factions within the city and fight each other in contested arenas across the solar system. Bungie has yet to provide us with an in-depth blowout of Destiny's competitive multiplayer modes, but in their last weekly update of 2013, they promised to unveil the multiplayer details that we've been craving and shed more light on those activities for every mood that they've been teasing. Thankfully, Bungie's latest podcast dropped some tasty little nuggets of info for those of us desperate for more details about the game. This video is a detailed breakdown of that podcast. It's time once again to talk about Destiny. Now, it's worth pointing out that the details discussed by Bungie in their latest podcast are subject to change. Remember, the game is still 8 months away and we still have a beta to look forward to. A beta that will no doubt provide Bungie with invaluable feedback. When the game finally launches on September 9th, you'll be able to take your first steps in a universe that took Bungie over 6 years to build, polish and refine. A universe you'll be exploring for the next decade and beyond. Now, the two main topics of discussion in the podcast were player investment and competitive multiplayer. Player investment will play a crucial role in Destiny's longevity. It's what will keep players coming back for more. Bungie's encouraging long-term investment in Destiny by offering activities for every mood. There's a misconception that player investment only involves grinding for XP and marching through the storyline, but Bungie has made it clear that learning and caring about the game's lore, building a community, mastering a certain weapon, class or multiplayer map, forging the perfect fire team, making new friends on your journey, the whole social aspect of the game, all these features are equally valid forms of investment and things that players can experience and enjoy in Destiny. On your adventures, you may, for example, bump into a fellow Guardian wielding the super rare exotic gun, Fate of Fools. Now, he could tell you how he acquired that weapon, or if he's feeling in a particularly generous mood, act as your guide and help fight alongside you as you set out to add this weapon to your collection. How you choose to spend your time in Destiny's universe is entirely up to you. You'll never be forced to play a certain way. Now, interestingly, Bungie also talks about how they experimented with the game's 3-weapon slot system and how, for example, moving the hand cannon from the special slot to the primary slot drastically changed how the player felt about their Guardian. With the hand cannon moved to the primary slot, the player felt like a badass gunslinger and not just another generic space marine with an assault rifle. But this decision also had gameplay consequences too. When assigned to the special slot, the hand cannon felt like a longer range shotgun or a shorter range marksman rifle. It existed as this odd in-between weapon. When moved to the primary slot, a slot usually reserved for assault rifles, it gave the player a broader scope to experiment with. The same thing happened when Bungie decided to move the sniper rifle from the heavy slot, where it wasn't really working out, to the special slot where it got a lot more play. In doing so, this also reduced the scope of the heavy slot, which actually worked out well, because the remaining heavy weapons now really stood apart from the rest of Destiny's arsenal as hardcore damage-dealing weapons, like the rocket launcher for example. Like I said before, Bungie has yet to finalise exactly which weapons will be assigned to which weapon slot, but this willingness to experiment to see what works best bodes very well for the final build of the game. Interestingly, Bungie explains how its investment team would have failed in its job to create balanced gameplay if every player finds themselves using the same weapon. Obviously, something isn't balanced if every player is pursuing that one overpowered gun. Destiny has a huge arsenal of weapons, and Bungie wants every player to feel as though their weapon is unique. And while Bungie's taking great care building a balanced game, it's also just as passionate about creating a universe that is constantly evolving. The game that you play on day one will not be the same game 6 months down the line. Bungie hinted at adding new maps, new destinations, new storylines and new progression trees. Halo Combat Evolved was given as a hypothetical example of how this could work. For example, you'd boot up the game to find that Blood Gulch is actually a little different, that there's now a new Warthog variant. Things like this would have helped shake things up, make Halo's world seem more alive, and you can expect this kind of dynamic evolution to occur within Destiny's universe. Bungie asks why games have to get old and die, and for me, this is probably the most exciting thing that Bungie says throughout the entire podcast. It's a throwaway line, sure, but reveals a key insight into Bungie's ambitions for Destiny, a universe that never dies. Bungie also talks about saving up to purchase new ground vehicles with cool blue contrails. So far, the only Guardian vehicle Bungie has revealed other than your personal spaceship is the Sparrow, which you see here, a non-combat speeder bike that allows Guardians to quickly traverse the game's expansive open world areas. The ability to tweak the colour of the vehicle's contrails is a nice little insight into the level of customization we can expect from the game. Now, the second half of the podcast focuses on competitive multiplayer. Bungie talks about how nervous they were when they allowed Game Informer to be the first people outside of their studio to actually play the game. At first, Game Informer were playing it cool, not giving anything away, but towards the end of their time with the game, they were bursting to praise Bungie for creating a truly remarkable experience. Now, interestingly, Bungie says that the first thing players will notice about Destiny's competitive multiplayer is that the studio is not making another Halo game. Destiny will have a more diverse sandbox, more ways for players to fight and kill each other. Destiny's choice of vertical movement modes, the different types of grenades you can use, and the way you level your focus will make the game feel really different. Now let's have a look at exactly how players will control vertical movement. You jump using the X button, but while you're in midair you can tap the button again to trigger your Guardian's movement focus. For example, double jump, glide and even short range teleportation. These different forms of vertical movement will add a strategic layer to Destiny's competitive multiplayer. And as you learn how to use these various movement modes, you'll discover that a short range teleport, for example, may be more effective against an offensive kind of player than say a double jump. The vertical movement mode you choose to adopt will also determine how you get around the map. And it's not just vertical movement that players will have to master. Destiny also allows you to slide, a useful tactic if you want to break your enemy's line of sight. And it's worth noting too that when you perform a vertical movement mode, you're temporarily unable to fire your gun or throw grenades. Now, during the podcast, Bungie also mentions a weapon we've never heard of before, the Arc Prox, a proximity mine that attaches to any surface and fires out electrical damage when a Guardian gets within range. Again, this type of weapon mixes up the gameplay and adds a layer of strategy to competitive multiplayer. According to Bungie, the Arc Prox isn't powerful enough to entirely obliterate your foe, but you can use it to block off routes, help control specific zones on the map, and generally cause chaos and confusion. And get this, Bungie also mentions yet another attack we've not heard of before, the Axiom Bolt. Now, the Axiom Bolt appears to be a unique super for the Warlock and similar to the Nova Bomb in how it functions. The Nova Bomb is a single, powerful ball of energy that can take out numerous enemies. My guess is that the Axiom Bolt fires 3 smaller bolts of energy as shown here. And let's see that again. The Warlock's projectile clearly splits into 3 smaller projectiles. So then, the Axiom Bolt appears to be one of the Warlock supers, but how are supers triggered? What exactly does a Guardian need to do in order to build up the energy required to unleash a super? Thankfully, Bungie alludes to this in the podcast. It appears that notching up kills is an effective way of building up supers. If you have a weak player on your team who's constantly dying, he'll feed the opposition supers and in doing so, make your team even more vulnerable. And the podcast drops yet another bombshell. It seems as though supers can be countered. During the podcast, Bungie describes yet another new super, this time from a Titan. This super involves a sprinting shoulder barge, but this particular super seems to have a weakness. The opposition can see it coming and therefore has time to react to it. Bungie describes how a hunter quickly snaps to his golden gun super and takes down a Titan mid-shoulder barge with a well-placed headshot. A super countered by another super. As you can begin to see, Destiny's competitive multiplayer is shaping up to be this frenetic, layered experience. Yes, you'll need skill to win, but you'll also need to understand how your Guardian moves, what supers are effective in particular situations, what grenades you decide to employ, and of course, mastery of map layout. Now, Bungie says something in the podcast that will have competitive multiplayer fans breathing a huge sigh of relief. According to Bungie, the maps you'll play are specifically designed 100% from the ground up to be awesome for competitive multiplayer. The screenshot that you see here is in fact a multiplayer map, currently called Rooftops. As you can see, it's set on Mars. The large circular structure in the middle actually revolves, which should add an interesting element to the gameplay. So then, Destiny's competitive multiplayer is shaping up to be unlike anything that's gone before. More than ever, players need to understand how every decision they make, including their vertical movement mode and choice of grenades and supers, will affect how each match plays out. Like I said before, in the build up to the beta, Bungie will go into greater detail about how competitive multiplayer works. In the meantime, let's see what Bungie's latest weekly update has to offer. Now, the most notable thing about Bungie's latest weekly update was the inclusion of 17 gorgeous high-res Destiny screenshots. Some of you may have already seen them in Game Informer's exclusive hands-on preview, and some of you may have yet to see them. Either way, I'm going to talk you through them now. There are 6 screenshots showing Mars and 11 showing Venus. Let's start with Mars. This first screenshot highlights the grand scale of Destiny's open world areas. The tiny Guardian silhouetted against the red dunes demonstrates just how vast these areas are, and the skyboxes are as spectacular as you'd expect them to be in a Bungie game. Next up, we see 2 Cabal Centurions ready to go to war, and if you look closely you'll see a smaller Cabal variant in the background. If we zoom in, we can get a better look at him. This is a Scion, a powerful member of the Cabal army, able to harness the power of their minds to confront enemies. They also pilot the Cabal's huge ships. Next up, we see the exclusion zone during the night. Every location in Destiny will have a full day-night cycle, which will have actual gameplay consequences. For example, this is the exclusion zone during the day, and as such will have more Cabal soldiers patrolling the area. If you want to adopt a more stealthy approach, it's best to wait until the cover of darkness. Next up, we see a Cabal Centurion reeling from the blast of a Guardian's grenade. Centurions are equipped with jetpacks, allowing them to cover great distances despite their bulky armour. And here we see a Cabal Gladiator taking some serious damage from a Hunter. In the background to the left there appears to be some sort of structure. Whether this is some kind of Cabal tank or base is unclear. Next up, we see a Hunter staring down a huge Cabal dropship. When these things enter a battle, you have 2 choices: flee or stand your ground and prepare to fight. And this Hunter doesn't look like he's in the mood to flee. Now let's move on to Venus. First up, we see what I'm guessing is a warp gate. The Vex use warp gates to arrive in the solar system, likely from another time in the past or future. Whether Guardians will be able to enter these mysterious structures remains to be seen. Next up, we see a screenshot of Venus's landscape. There's a toxic beauty to this planet, and as ever, the skybox is stunning. I can't wait to finally explore Venus on next-gen hardware. And here we see a Hunter leaping above a group of incoming Vex goblins. It's a nice touch that the Vex appear to be looking up, following the Hunter's movement. Next up, we see a Titan decked out in a particularly badass looking helmet with a single glowing eye. Now, I've heard many people remark how this helmet looks similar to the Vex's robotic head, and I'm inclined to agree. Perhaps this armour is fashioned from the remains of slain Vex. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Next up, we see a Hunter facing off against a Vex Minotaur. I love how this shot shows off the game's amazing flare effects. The background appears to be another kind of warp gate. And here we see the Vex Citadel, a gravity-defying structure hidden away in the heart of Venus's jungle. I expect this will look pretty intimidating, looming in the distance as you approach it. No one knows what this structure is, only that the Vex defend it with lethal ferocity. Next up, we see what appears to be a Vex Hydra. These things are segmented machines that flow through the air to attack. It appears to be guarding some kind of alien structure. Next up, we see a Titan firing an assault rifle at a Vex Minotaur. The flare effects and gentle blurring at the edge of the screen gives a real sense of movement and looks utterly stunning. This screenshot shows a mob of Vex goblins confronting a fire team. Blue electricity crackles all around. Its source is unclear, but certainly helps to show off the game's dynamic lighting. And here we see a Vex Minotaur attacking a Titan with a brutal looking melee blow. Now this is a very interesting screenshot because it gives us our first glimpse of Vex Hobgoblins, these 2 delightful looking creatures right here. Now if we zoom in, we see their 2 distinguishing features, a V-shaped head and long flowing tails. Personally, I can't wait to reduce these time travelling freaks to scrap metal. And finally we see a Titan surrounded by Vex Goblins. This would be the perfect time to unleash a Fist of Havoc Super and mess these bastards up. So then, let's round off this video with the best questions from Bungie's mail sack. The first question is from Gunrunner48, who asks, are we going to get a Destiny drawing board anytime soon? Here's how Bungie responds: yes, soon. It's high time that we return to the drawing board. Don't expect any more guns, however. The rest of the armory will be a thing for you to discover. Stay tuned. We're about to propel the series into its next phase. The next question is from Kay Keelia, who asks, why has there been so little info on Venus? And here's how Bungie responds: Venus is still very much a mystery to us. Very few Guardians have braved an adventure there, even fewer have returned. As seductive the lure of the ruins in those jungles may be, the danger is greater. We need Guardians to reclaim our rightful ownership of that lost world. Your question seems to indicate that you might be such a champion. The next question is from Hylaboss, who asks, who is the director? And here's how Bungie answers: the director is not a who, it's a what. Think of it as a guide. Think of it as an oracle. It's equal parts war plan and treasure map. And finally, we have a question from Bad Account who asks, will it help to have variety in your fire team? Would a fire team with a Titan, a Warlock and a Hunter be better than a fire team with 2 Titans and a Hunter? And here's how Bungie responds. Let's look at it from this perspective. Each Guardian has a very specific talent that makes them dangerous to our enemies. When you combine those talents, something wonderful happens. They complement one another. They make each other stronger and cloak each other's weaknesses in armor wrought from teamwork. Of course, we'll let you venture into the wild with a Titans only club if you insist. Thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. If we can get this video to 3,000 likes, that would be amazing and show me that you guys like these longer type of videos. Subscribe for more Destiny news and thanks for watching, you beautiful bastards. Here comes that mother chuff of a boom. Hello again my friends, really glad to see you made it beyond the boom. Now, if you want to know more about Destiny's enemies, click the on-screen image. I fill you in on everything you need to know about the Fallen, the Cabal, the Vex and the Hive. And guys, I just wanted to say thank you for continuing to support my videos. The past month has seen my channel grow at the fastest rate since I started YouTube over a year ago. So if you're a new subscriber, welcome. And if you're an old subscriber, thank you so much for sticking with me. And guys, let me also draw your attention to the description box of this video. You'll find links to my Twitter and Facebook. If you follow me on these two, you'll never miss a single scrap of Destiny news. And one more thing before I go. I've hidden a beta access code in this video. If you want to redeem it, you'll need to be lightning quick as these things go super fast. Good luck. And as always, until next time, Guardians.